All right, so here we go. We'll draw a rectangle. What I'm going to do for my rectangle is draw it like that, sort of flat. Pick a point for my height. And connect those points. How does that look? Somewhat okay? Often the three-dimensional picture is hard to see, and the net is more helpful. So can you see that when you open this up and lay it flat, you'd have your rectangle, which is 4 by 6. Okay? This does not look to scale. My 6 looks more than twice as big as my 4. That's okay. And then off of here I would have a triangle. Off of here I would have a triangle. Off of here I would have a triangle. And off of here I would have a triangle. The height is 8. Now one thing we have to be careful with here is with a word like height, you might be tempted to draw all of these lines in these triangles in the net as 8. But that's a slant height. So when it's talking about height, that's going right from the middle to the top. That's where the 8 is. Now in order to figure out the surface area of this, looking at the shape that we have, can you see that you have 2 bigger triangles, 2 smaller triangles, and a rectangle? Right away from the rectangle, that's the easy part. We know that that's going to be 24 meters squared for that rectangle. But in order to find these triangles, we're going to need that height for that triangle and this height for that triangle. In other words, on this diagram, can you see that you're going to need, that'll be one height on our three-dimensional one, and the other height will look like that. We need to calculate those. Those weren't given to us. How are we going to find those black lines? Because that's the hardest part in this question. We're not given what those slant heights are. Yes? Okay. Okay, so if, let's say we're looking at this one here, okay? I'll draw it right like that. And I'll draw my height like this, 8. And if this is a hypotenuse, because I know my height goes straight up, so that's a 90 degree when it goes straight up, I'll need to figure out an additional line here. We want to find the hypotenuse. Put that as my x because I don't know what that value is. Do I know how long this blue line is? On my regular drawing, that blue line is going to go right here. Okay, and how do we know it's 3? It's going to be half of 6. And then you've made a right triangle. And what can you do with right triangles? Find the hypotenuse of a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So 8 squared plus 3 squared would equal x squared in this case. And 64 plus 9, 73 equals x squared. So x is equal to turn on my calculator here. I'm going to show you some pretty cool stuff with the calculator as well. Square root. So your square root button on your calculator, you're going to have to hit second second, and then square root, and it was square root of 73? And 8.54. Now, remember how we talked about not rounding things until the end? It's going to be kind of hard because we're going to do a bunch of calculations. We still need to find the other hypotenuse for that case. So one of the nice things about this calculator is that you have right above the on button a store button. See, it says sto. That's short for store. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to store this as, and then I have a green button depending on which one calculator you have. Your alpha button might be a different color. Since we chose X while we were writing it, there is an X button right here. So if I go alpha X, my calculator is now remembering that X is 8.544, which is going to be helpful later. Going back to the question, okay, my other triangle, I still have a height of 8 with a right angle. This hypotenuse for the other triangle will be there. How long will the base be? And I'll draw it in, I need a new color, magenta. There it is. That is going to be 2 because it's going to be half of 4. When I'm doing a question with more than one thing that I'm figuring out, I'm going to choose a different letter. Are you okay with y this time? So now 8 squared plus 2 squared would equal y squared. And this will be 64 plus 4, 68 equals y squared. And so y will equal the square root of 68. I'll go back to my calculator. I'll go square root of 68, push enter. And this one I'm going to store as y. So it remembers the 8.2 and all the decimal places for later. So it's nice that you have those values stored in to your calculator. So now what I can do is I can go back to my diagram. I know that I have these different values and I can write them in approximately what they are. The first one I found was this one, okay? And that's on, it had a base of 3 here. That was this 3 right there. But this side is the 4 one, so I know that this one, which was 8 point, go back for a second, 8.54. This one is 8.54, and the other one was 8.25. So we got 8.54 as one slant height for that one, and 8.25 as another slant height for the other one. When we're going to figure out the total surface area, we are going to have 2 triangles that are 6 times, just use brackets, 6 times 8.25 divided by 2, plus 2 triangles that are 4 times 8.54 divided by 2, plus the bottom, which we already figured out was 24. Are you okay with those numbers there? They make sense what I did?
Why is 8.4 on the side with the 4?
Well, I made sure, because this is the one where the 8.54 was found, right? Okay, so I need to go back and think of my 3-dimensional image and think of my net at the same time. Now, with this first triangle, the base here, which is 3, is because it's half a 6, but we're figuring out the slant height of the side 4. So it's easy to get this, so you can see where it's easy to get those numbers mixed up. That's why this question said draw the 3-dimensional image and the net, so you can see both of them. Now you could type this whole thing into your calculator as it is, and you're going to get the right answer. As far as doing some things that are going to save you some time, can you see that we're multiplying by 2 and later dividing by 2? Those things will cancel each other out because they're doing something and then undoing it. So I'm going to simplify that right now and say I don't have to do that because multiplying by 2 and then dividing by 2, that is the same thing as not doing anything at all. And same thing in this one. So I'm going to have 6 times 8.25. 8.25, by the way, was our y. And then 4 times 8.54, and the 8.54 was our x. And then plus 24. So when I go back to my calculator, I can say 6, and then instead of typing that all in, I can just type in y. Plus 4, and instead of typing in x, I can just multiply that by x. You can hit the multiply sign in between, or if you just have them close together, that's the same as multiplying. Plus 24. Push enter, and it tells us 107.65. It has remembered all of those decimal places, and it saved you the time of having to type them in. So our final surface area is approximately, because it said round to the nearest square meter, 108 meters squared.